Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how I built this OD1 clone from Build Your Own Clone. This is the Build Your Own Clone kit and they call it the Yellow Overdrive. So it's a replica of the Boss OD1. It's on their site as one of their easiest kits and you get this little paper with it. Further along in the video you'll see the components and everything. And my finishing process for it that I did everything but the labels yet. So I had a lot of fun building this. I am going to have a full video with sound samples, and what I'll do with this is I'll put it in front of a high gain amplifier if I can find one. I'm not sure, but the sound samples at the end, they are iPhone audio only. It's a Fender Stratocaster with clean single coils, and it's just to show that the thing works and about the maximum gain and maximum volume you get. There will be a future video, maybe in the next few days, where I get to put this in front of a cranked amp, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoy. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, any of that good stuff. All right, take care. Build Your Own Clone Yellow Overdrive Kit. This is a clone of the Boss OD1. I ordered this because I thought this would be cool for the power. These go in the back if you want to use your little feet. Here's our chip and our chip socket. Here's our printed board, pretty cool. Here are some capacitors, some resistors, and a diode. Jacks, I ordered Boss style knobs. We've got 2 pots, our switch, LED, some wire, battery snap, and Harper. What do you have to say about yourself? Aren't you talking today? Harper, you pretty? All right, we're gonna build a pedal? Oh. Here is the Build Your Own Clone Yellow Overdrive Kit. This is a clone of a Boss OD1. As you can see, the case is bare metal. Our first step is going to be to prep this, and then we will paint it. To get these ready for paint, I take a piece of 220 grit and I stick it to my workbench. Here was already a piece from another build I did. So I'll take this guy like this. And since my workbench is flat and the back of this is flat, I'm going to do this until it looks even all the way over it. When I flip this up, you'll see that it looks good. I'll also take and sand the edges, and I'll do the same for this top here. The next step is I use a product called naphtha, and I get a paper towel wet with it, and then I just go over top of my pedal. I do the whole thing. I'm holding a paper towel in my hand, so I'm going to finish this up and then I will show you what the next step is. For this step, I'm using a gray primer. So I've shaken this up for a couple minutes. I also warm my paint before I use it. I'm out here in a well-ventilated area and I will just start even passes. And we're making sure to get all of the angles on this. When I get the pedal case itself, well, I guess the whole thing's the pedal case. What I mean is the top. I like to start at the bottom. I work my way all the way around it first. Then I go over the top. Now this particular can, it has instructions for recoating and everything. Whatever you use, make sure to follow the instructions. Naturally, my painting would look a lot cleaner and I wouldn't be all over up and down if I wasn't holding a phone while I was doing this. But I wanted to show you all the longer it takes to put a coat of primer on. I'll do a second coat of primer here according to the instructions, and then we'll move to top coat. Okay, the primer is ready for top coat. I chose this guy here. So just like before, I'll go by, and I don't know if you noticed, but I start my spray a little bit away, probably too far for this video since I'm exaggerating things, but you don't want to just start like this right on it. So we'll start here, and then we'll work our way over with the spray. And like I said before, just being careful to get the pedal here from all the angles. The casing, I should say. And you can see I had a little bit of a flub up here. but that's all right. Catch that end. We're going to go right over top. Now this probably would have been better with a white primer, but I already started, so I'm committed. Okay, so that's going to need 2 more coats. So we'll do this according to the instructions, and then after this it'll be time for clear coat. Okay, we're back out here for another coat of this guy here. This is the Krylon Color Max Gloss Sun Yellow. It was on special at Lowe's for like $5. All right, so let's get this here. I know it seems like I'm really spraying far over to the sides, and I really am when you consider that it's a pedal, but I'm used to doing this and seeing this done in the body shops where you start a panel, or you start the paint before you get to the panel. That way you don't have just a big splotch right when you start. And here we are. Gonna look at that in the light a little bit here. Now you'll see I got a piece of dust that just landed right there. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. I'm not going to bother trying to rescue that. What I'm gonna do is I'll wait till that sets up, and then I'll get that out of there, and then I'll give it one more flash shot of this, and then we'll move on to clear coat. Okay, we're back out here to put our clear coat on. This is Krylon Fusion all-in-one. I have the can warmed and I'm ready to spray. This stuff here, it's a good clear coat. We're gonna do just what we did with the other coats. And we're gonna put 2 coats of this on. You wait a minute in between each coat. You can wait longer. You want to do it according to the instructions, but you have to wait at least a minute in between each coat. If you notice there's a little run I got there, I'm just going to leave that. I'm not going to get too finicky over it. And then that piece of dust on the top I told you about, I was going to remove that, and I decided that instead of removing that, I would leave it because the knob and the washer are going to cover that. Okay, so I'm going to wait about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. I'll take a look. All right, we're back. We're going to hit it with the last coat that we're going to put on it. I know I said I wasn't going to take that run out, but I know it's going to irritate me the more I look at it. Okay, now I'm going to just let that alone for a bit. Once that's ready to handle, I'll take that in and let it dry longer. So even though these will say on there that they are handle in an hour, you really got to wait longer than that, and you really can't begin to use it for a couple days. I like to let the case sit for about a week, then I can start messing with it. That finish, it's going to gas off for a good long time. All right, so stay tuned for the rest of it. I have the components sorted here, and I have the resistors all labeled. I checked them with my meter. The first step with this is to put the diodes in, and then I'll move to the resistors. Okay, our iron is up to temp, and it's time to solder in these diodes. Okay, so the legs are trimmed on this. And we'll take the resistors from my cheat sheet here. I don't see color properly. So what I do is I check everything with my meter anyway, and then I just write what's going where. The board tells us where everything goes on this. So for example, right here, this guy shows 10K, so we would grab one of these 10K resistors right here off my cheat sheet, take it like such, plug it right into the board, into its corresponding pins, and then solder that into place. I'm going to populate the board with these, and then I'll turn this back on once I start soldering. All of the 10Ks are in their places, so I'll solder these in place. I have all the resistors into the board. I have some of them soldered already, and then we're going to solder the rest here right now. So I'm going to set this down here, put that in the view of the camera, I hope. Clean off our tip and just work our way across. The next step is putting this socket into place. That's so you don't have to solder onto the chip itself. So on your socket, there's a little detent right there. You want to orient that the correct way on the board, and this should just pop right in and line up nicely. You shouldn't have to do anything to get that to fit. And if you do, you don't want to force it. Just take a look at your little feet on there and make sure that none of them are bent. This one just dropped right in. So all I'm going to do to just kind of hold this in place while I work is I'm going to just kind of bend that one little tab in place down there and one there. And then I'll start soldering these. So let's get right to that. And for these, it may look like there's a lot of solder going in, but I'm using the thinnest solder, so it makes it easier to melt and flow and all good stuff like that. So here we are. We're just going to go right down the line and get all of the feet for this socket. One side done. Here we are with our next side. We're almost there. The next step is the film capacitors. These are not polarized. So your board will be labeled here. And if you look, this shows 1U. So it's a 1 microfarad capacitor. This guy here, the 105J, this is our 1 microfarad capacitor. So I'm going to pop that guy in just like that. I'm going to move these feet just a little tiny bit. Give me something to solder to. I shouldn't say give me something to solder to, I should say, so it doesn't fall out while I have it in here. So that guy's soldered in. I can clip the leads. When you clip your leads, don't go too close that you damage the pad, but go close enough that you don't have something hanging down causing an issue. So there's that. Now we have to put in, let's find our next one. See if I can bring you in for this. This shows 0.016. So for that guy there, we're going to put in our, I'm trying to show you this here, I'm trying to roll this in my hand, our 0.18 microfarad, because that's what's going to go in that spot. So we'll put this guy in just like this, do just like we did before, fold those tabs over. That's in. Now that that's cooled, snip, snip. Okay, so I have 4 of these film capacitors left. I have 0.1 microfarads to go in, and I have 2 0.047 microfarads. As you can guess, the 0.047s go here. Do the same thing I did there. Solder these in quickly. Those guys are in. And now let's get our last 2 film capacitors in. So just like that. And just like that. Solder these last 2. These are electrolytic capacitors. The shorter leg is the negative, and there's also an indicator pointing to that. The longer leg is the positive. So the rating on this one here, we have 10 microfarads, and we're going to put that into the board here. And when we do this, the positive goes into the square part of the hole here. These are polarized, and if you put them in improperly, you'll let the smoke out of them. This one here is a 100 microfarad. Again, long leg positive, shorter leg negative. The positive goes into the square part of the hole, the negative goes into the round part. And for our final, we have a 47 microfarad. Again, negative, positive, positive goes into the square part of the hole. Just going to move these tabs a little bit so I can solder them in place without them falling out while I do it. Figures I put one right in my own way. The next step on this is to install the battery snap. So this is a strain relief piece right here. So you thread the two leads of the battery snap through, red going to be positive here. Red is going to be, not red going to be. And then you go through the top here, and this is going to be soldered from the bottom side of the board. So you go up from the solder side, down into the holes, and you solder from the other side. So we're just going to pull these a little bit more taut to that, but I find that it's easier to give yourself a little bit of room to work when you do this. So we're just about there. Okay, so now I can come from underneath the board. I can solder these connections. When you're soldering anything with a plastic coated wire, you don't want to hang on it too long, because if you do, the insulation will peel back on that. The next step is cutting pieces of wire to put into the board. So the instructions say to cut 4 2.5-inch pieces and then 1 1.5-inch piece. So what I do when I do this is I get my first piece of wire I'm going to cut, and I go, that's about 2.5 inches. And then after I do that, I go, all right, well, that one's right. So this one should be right along the same size here. Cut that. I'm just going to do that till I have my 4 pieces of wire. So now that I have 3 of them, and this one here is going to be number 4. Right here. Boom. Now, they're not all going to be exact, but what I'll do with them is once I put them in, I'll snip them to what they need to be. So the instructions say to strip a little bit off of each piece here, because we're going to put them on our board. These are going to be wires that go to our inputs and outputs on this. So we go like this here. Okay, so our pieces of wire are soldered, and we're going to go to the in, the out, and the ground eyelets on the PCB here. And these will be soldered from the solder side of the PCB. So you'll plug them in through the top like the battery snap, and then you'll solder them from the underneath, the solder side, the underneath side. So just like this one here, we need one that goes to out. So we'll go like this. This is an out. Go in just like so. And you can set that however, it's not going to matter. There we have that. Little snip. It'll put a piece of wire in my finger. And then we'll go to the next one. So that was our out. We'll go to in. And you don't need to go in any specific order here. Just get them in the right places. That looks pretty good there. So a little snip. And then our 2 ground holes. So you have one right here. And we have one right here. If I can get this in. And this will be an illustration as to why you do them one at a time like I was doing. You can use a helping hands tool, or you can use, for example, Stu Mac makes the PCB holder. You can use that. You can fiddle around with it while you're recording yourself doing it on video. You can put the piece in and kind of fold it over. There's more than one way to skin a cat. The important thing is that you have electrical continuity and conductivity, and you have connections that are good, that your solder looks wet. You don't want any craters in there indicating a bad connection. We call that a cold solder joint. So here we are. Next one in. And I'll tell you, this is kind of weird. I'm doing this looking at the back of my phone as I'm recording this, rather than actually looking at my work. So it's weird. It's like, you ever been to a concert and you start recording the show, and you find yourself, you're recording the show, but you're looking at it through your phone. So I'm always careful when I do it. I try and watch it with my own eyes because I'd rather see it that way. And then sometimes I'll find my recording drifts. Okay, so here you can see our pieces of wire are all relatively close to the same size. If I pull them up to the end here, there's a little difference, but these will all make the connections they need to make. So then the next one that needs cut is one piece of wire that is 1.5 inches. The 1.5 inch piece is going to the ring eyelet on the PCB. So this is closer to 2 inches, so we'll just go with that. Put our wire right here. Strip this just like this. Go right here. Ring eyelet, boom. This guy goes in like so. Go right here. And that is soldered. Now that that's cold, cut that piece there. All right, let's go to our next step. This is where this guy is going to get a little involved. Let me dump this out without losing my components. So we're going to use our case now here. I'm going to take a quick break and come right back to this. Okay, so I put the power socket in here, the DC socket. I chose yellow because they didn't have black in stock, and I figured yellow would work with the pedal. You'll see there's an internal nut here, and I have this sort of loose because if I need to turn this to work on it, and then I'll use a flat wrench like one of these guys. They're very thin to take care of fastening that into place. So after this, there's the step with these guys here. I'll take the nut and the washer off of these, bust off the tabs, lay the board in there, and get this fitted. So I'm going to take a quick break and I'll be right back. So this kit has 2 knobs. This pot here is a B10K. This pot here is an A1 meg. So this is an audio taper. This here is a linear taper. So for the step, what we do is we're going to take the board and then we're going to flip it so that the solder side is up. And then we're going to put this B10K. You see how this says 10K here? So if I flip this over, that's this one right here. And then the A1 meg is going to go right here. So they're going to go just like that. And then the LED. Now, just like the polarized capacitors, the LED is polarized as well. Diodes are polarized. So this guy here, it's hard to see it, but there's a flat spot on this. And that flat spot would correspond to, I'll flip this back over, the flat spot on the board right here. But since we're going to solder from this side, we can't go, oh, the flat's there. But also your indicator is you have the square and you have the round. So take your little LED like this, and your longer lead is going to go through the square hole. So now what you do is you take this guy like this in your hand, and then you go like this with this, and you set this on top. So after you do this, then you flip it over and you line this up. And the goal of this part here is so that you can set this so that everything lines up. Your board isn't going like this down here, touching the solder side here, not touching here, putting strain on that. You line it up correctly. That way when you solder this, everything's nice and level and all set. So I'm going to get this set, and then after that, actually, you know what? We'll just do it this way. We'll do it right here. I'll show you, because sometimes you end up swearing about this a few times. So you're going to put a nut and a washer on, and you're not going to go super, super tight. These don't need to be super tight at this stage. This is just more of a lining up thing. Soldering in this part, it's a little tight. Now you're going to start working in the case. So go like this, go like this. Okay. Everything here is seated just like this. Now we're going to have to solder the pots and the LED. Well, I don't want my board sitting in an angle like this down, because that's going to put unnecessary strain there. So what I do when I do these ones is I'll put something underneath. It can be anything. In this case, this knob's going to work out pretty well. So I'm going to put this right here, line that up, and then I'll begin soldering these joints. For the potentiometers, these are a larger piece of metal. You can hang on them a little bit longer with the iron than you can a small component. And you want to make sure that you get a good amount of solder contact on these. So what I do when I do it is I do the first one, and then I let it cool, and then I'll go over and I'll do one on the other side, and I'll let it cool, and then I'll finish them all off. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want this to move around while the solder is still wet and hot. So I'll go like this, I'll wait. Now once this is cool, I can press on this and that's not going anywhere. So I'll go just like this and I'll finish them all off. Plus I'll retouch the first two that I did just to make sure that the connection's good. Now this here is the first one I did, so it doesn't need much. Just holding that iron on in there a little bit. And then over here is the first one, so I'm going to go just like this. Same thing. Now I still have to do the LED, but I found on these what I like to do is I like to make sure that the LED is actually in place when I do this. So everything looks good here. That sound you heard was my little placeholder. Now you see how that's not leaning on anything? Everything looks good there. So now I can solder my LED. Now with the LEDs, I don't like to stay on them any longer than I have to. They're not going to fall apart or anything. I treat them a little bit more gingerly. So very quickly in and out on that. And then I go and I check it out. Looks pretty good. So that looks pretty good there. I did a poor job of explaining what I mean, but in the StewMat kits, so when you pop that LED in, then you'll kind of feed it through the hole. And when you feed it through the hole, you're pushing the leads down through. You don't have as much room to work. Well, if you cut them super short and you ever have to service it after the fact, you go, all right, well, desolder that. Once you put the LED back in the board, you're not going to be able to get to that because once you desolder it, there's not enough length to work with there. In that case, just use another LED. They're not very expensive. So that's what our board looks like right now. Okay, so I have this out of the pedal casing now. The instructions show you doing it inside the pedal casing, and I find that's just a giant pain in the ass. So what I do is I get all my pieces that I'm going to put in, and I'm going to solder them outside of the casing. And then I'll put it back into the casing, and then I'll solder them to the board in there. So this is just more than one way to skin a cat. You know, if this makes it easier for you, you can do it this way. So just for the sake of our sanity, that's why we did it that way. So now we can go right back in, take our nut, thread our nut right over these long leads. And these are long on purpose. And again, here I am doing that thing I told you about where I'm looking at the back of my phone. And instead of looking at my work. So here we are. Hopefully I can get that threaded on there right, huh? Okay, so now that I have these where I want them on their solder pads, I can tighten this down. So I'm going to set this so that the tip is all the way to the left. And then I'm going to get my little wrench here, and I'm going to tighten this down, and then I'm going to put the guts back in the pedal. So I'll come back once everything's back in the pedal. Okay, so this guy is in now, and I have two of the connections on the board made. I'm going to make the last one here, and just take your piece of wire that you've tinned, and that makes it a little bit easier to work with here. And you'll feed that into the hole like so. So basically all we've done is connect where the battery is going to go, where the DC power goes to the board, all that good stuff. And then these connections you make from the top of the board. So you have to be careful because you don't want to lay your iron on top of something else and burn another component. Right there we go. Okay, so the steps after this are going to be the switch and then the jacks. The stereo jack will get these ones, the mono jack will get these, the switch will get that, and it'll go to those. So be back here in just a second. In this step, we're going to take a piece that we cut from one of the resistors, and we're going to make a jumper for two of the legs here on the switch. So these little pliers I have are super handy for this, and go just like this. And I know that this piece is super long for what we need, but I figured to make it easier to see, and I'm just going to cut off any of the excess. So I'll go like this, pull that in nice and tight. My jumper is in. I go just like this, like that. I'll solder that into place, and then I'll cut those long tabs off. I'll show you exactly what I mean here. Oh, got some pieces of wire that I just threw into the frame. Moving around a good bit here because I don't have this into anything. We'll do the other one. Take a look, our connections look good. No cold solder joints. And then I'm going to cut those excess pieces off there. So it's hanging on. There we are. There's our good jumper right there. For this step, I have to jumper two lugs with this piece of wire. This guy here to this guy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this piece of heat shrink tubing that I cut right there. I'm going to put my wire through the lug hole. And I thought I had that lined up better, but that's all right. Take my little pliers, line this up like so, pull this back and try again. Right there we are in. Now I'm going to pull this back just a little bit and line this up with the lug hole right here so I can get this right through, and then I can begin the soldering. So let's see here. We're almost there. Almost. See if that helped it along. Yep, boom. So now what I can do, I can solder that connection. If I can get my solder here. Got a new roll. In case you're wondering, I use 6040 rosin core leaded solder. Now, what I'm going to do, that's a piece of heat shrink tubing. We have to shrink it. So we'll get just a little lighter out of our box here. We'll just shrink that tube. And then that just provides a little bit of protection between those points. The next step is putting the leads on the switch so they stick out. That way we can put them into the board, and I will show you that here in a second. Okay, we got 5 pieces of wire. One's going to go right here. Maybe. Just like that. I'll solder that now so I can cut it. Give that a second to cool. Joint looks good. Cut that excess. Go to the next one. I'm going to pull this up because I don't want to bridge that connection accidentally. It won't matter once we cut it, but if we can work neater, why not? Cut the excess on that. So we have 3 of our wires. We have 3 to go. Let's do this middle one now. One of the things I can tell you with working on electronics like this is don't be afraid to second guess your work. Don't have an ego about checking your work. That's some advice for you. Don't have an ego about checking your work. The next step is putting this guy in here. So I'm going to strip these pieces of wire like this. One's already done. I did that when I did the little splice job. And then one of the other things we're going to do here this will make our life easier here in a minute. Okay, so this guy here, we're going to spin the nut off here. We're going to put this guy inside. This guy's going to go just like that. We'll go here with the plastic one here on the outside. You don't need to tighten this down super, super, super tight right now. Just get it down there good and snug. And then what I'll do is I'll hold one side of it with my hand and hold the switch with the other. Go like that. Now, they're pretty intuitive how these go. Instead of you having to go, what one's 2, what one's 1, what one's 5, 4, 7, 8, they have made it so that you kind of just go around it in order. And if you notice, when you cut these leads, they do come out a bit long. Okay, so now we're going to bend the wires into the sockets, into the holes, just like this. Right in. You've seen we pre-tinned that. And these ones get soldered from this side up. So this one's a little bit more challenging. If you burn the insulation, it's not a huge deal. It's purely cosmetic. But try not to because it stinks. And you don't want that junk on your iron if you can help it. So that's one of them done. And then we'll just go right across here, just like this. And remember those pliers I said I love? They're great for this job here. If you don't have them, what you're gonna end up doing, you're gonna kind of pull like this, and you're going to go just like this, and you're gonna fight it back and forth. You could use your wire strippers, whatever, or you can use these pliers and just feed it in just like that. So those pliers are worth every penny. And again, soldering from this side here. So get your solder, feed it where you're gonna go. Here we are. Remember how I said don't hit the insulation? I just did. I can smell it. It smells wonderful. It smells like something that you definitely want to have inside you. It's like, yeah, I should breathe more of that in. So then the next one on our list is the middle one, the middle lug here. So not this top middle, but the middle. And we're going to go just like this. Move that to the side so you can see this, hopefully. And you're going to go right here, just like that. And we're almost done with this here. So here we are. Help if I hit the solder pad, huh? There we are. Clean this up just a little bit. All right. Now we go to the middle top. We're going to go just like this. Right here. In we go. Two more to go. This guy right here in the upper right corner, it's going to go to pin 7. These are pliers. Just like that. Hit the insulation again. I think I just showed you the top of my head rather than the work. So all those connections are in. Looks pretty good. The next step will be getting the inputs in place. This is purely a matter of personal preference. The ones that come in the kit, they're China labeled. The first one that I had before, the sleeve would spin in the socket. So I'm not going to use these. I'm actually going to put them in a used bin. Even though there's a brand new, I'm going to put them in a used bin. And here's some Switchcraft ones that I have. So this would be a Switchcraft 11 for the mono and a 12B for the stereo. So they look similar, but I've just been using Switchcraft for so many years, and I would prefer to use that. So here we are. So I started what I thought was recording this before I actually was recording it, and I looked at my thing and I saw I wasn't recording. So our last step is putting our inputs in place. The kit comes with some Chinese inputs. I like Switchcraft, so I've put Switchcraft in here. This is a 12B stereo. This is an 11 mono, and I'll show you. I took the ones that it came with, and I put them in my used parts bin. So these are new, but right there, they're both Chinese made. I'm sure they're fine, but I've been using Switchcraft forever, so that's what I'm going to stick with.
when I'm building something. And that's been the only change that I've made to these kits as I build them, is I've been using Switchcraft inputs. Except for the chorus I built. I did not use the Switchcraft inputs for the chorus. That's actually when I noticed they weren't Switchcraft inputs, was because when I went to put it together, I noticed that the input was spinning, and I actually soldered the sleeve back in place so that it would hold. So what I'm going to end up doing is replacing that input that's on my course that I built from Build Your Own Clone with a Switchcraft. Looks good, but looks a little starved. That's much better. All right, here's our last two connections that we're going to make. I want to say that I really enjoy the Build Your Own Clone kits. If you're a beginner and you have some soldering iron experience, I think you'll be just fine building one. I think that the parts are well laid out. The instructions are easy to follow. They're a little bit more complex than the StewMac kit because they want you to, I guess, know a little bit more, so to speak. I guess they assume you know a little bit more about it. But with that said, I think it's a pretty rewarding kit. They work well. Now, if you want step-by-step, hold your hand instructions, I feel like the StewMac ones are they're geared towards someone with very, very little experience. And it's awesome because if you have no experience doing it, it's a way for you to build a pedal and get into it, see if you like doing that kind of stuff. Here I am. I'm looking at the back of my phone again. I've done that several times during this build. Okay. Let's get those to cool. Cut. Cut. Get those pieces out of there. And then just tighten these a little bit more. Not much. Now, we need to find out if the darn thing works. So, see if I can do this without catching anything on fire. Okay, this is one of the ones you'll have to have plugged in, I bet. There you go. All right, let's get this thing all buttoned up, tighten everything down where we want it, and then get a sound sample. I forgot to put the IC chip in, so I would have been sorely upset when I didn't have any sound. So there we go. Now we're actually correct. But let's check that again to make sure that we have functionality. Make sure the light lights up. All right, now let's get some sound samples. This is the Build Your Own Clone Yellow Overdrive. That's a clone of the Boss OD1. We have a clean practice amplifier on right now with a bridge pickup of a Fender Strat. I have this set to about unity volume and maximum on the drive. I guess it's not quite unity. It sounds a bit louder now. Let's dial that back a little bit. Put both knobs at noon. We're going to max both knobs out.